Hi everyone, welcome to week 2 of the college football season, and welcome to Fresno, California, where we are at for Saturday night's game of Minnesota at Fresno State. We will be at Bulldog Stadium for that game tomorrow night. My name is Mike Browning. I am your host, and I'm the owner of College Football Road Trip at cfbroadtrip.com. So I will be writing about the game and everything I've been doing in Fresno, California, and my stadium reports that will come out in about a week of everything I've done in Fresno. Also, if you want to be up to date on all the things I've been doing in Fresno each day, go to my Instagram page. It's CFB_road trip. I'll be posting some pics of all the things we've done while we're here. Today I went to the Fresno Zoo. I also spent some time on the Fresno State campus, so I'll be posting some pics of that later on today. So let's get to week 2 picks for this week. Last week in week 1, I went 7-3, which is a pretty decent first week, especially when you think the 2 of the losses that I had were huge comeback wins. First from Nevada over Purdue, who was originally down by 19 points late in the third quarter, and then North Carolina with a great comeback win over South Carolina in Mac Brown's first game at North Carolina. With no further ado, here we go. Let's start with our first week 2 pick. Our first game for this week is Cincinnati at Ohio State. So we know Cincinnati had a great win last week at home against UCLA. That kind of showed that UCLA still has a lot of work to do. Ohio State is a lot better than UCLA. I do think Cincinnati's going to make this a good game for the first half, but I don't think they're going to be able to sustain it through the entire game. I think in the second half, Ohio State will pull away. Ohio State over Cincinnati. Our second game this week is going to be West Virginia at Missouri. Missouri is one of those teams in the SEC that had an upset loss last week at Wyoming. Kelly Bryant didn't have a very great game, but they play at home this week against the West Virginia team that struggled to put away FCS James Madison last week. So I think Missouri is going to get back on the right track this week. I'm going to pick Missouri to beat West Virginia at Missouri. Our third game of this week is one of the big ones for this week. You have Texas A&M traveling to Clemson. Last year, this was a really tight game. A&M put Clemson all the way to the end of the game, but until Clemson pulled away. This year, the game is at Clemson. Clemson struggled a little bit. Trevor Lawrence struggled a little bit last week, but I think he'll get back on track this week. A&M will keep it close for the first half, but Clemson's going to have too much talent and pull away from Texas A&M in the second half. So I'm going to pick Clemson over Texas A&M. Our next game puts together 2 former Big 8 rivals when Nebraska goes to Colorado. For some reason, Nebraska is still ranked. I still don't really think they deserve that ranking yet. They struggled with South Alabama for a lot of the game last week. They're traveling to Colorado, and honestly, I think Colorado at home has the opportunity to win this game. So I'm going to pick Colorado to beat Nebraska at home in what would probably be considered a minor upset. So Colorado over Nebraska. Our next game puts another SEC team that lost last week. Tennessee is playing at home against BYU this week. BYU lost to Utah last week. They're traveling to Tennessee. It's going to be interesting to see which one of these 2 teams can put it together after their loss last week. Since Tennessee is playing at home this week, again, I'm going to pick Tennessee to beat BYU. So Tennessee over BYU at home. Our next game is probably the biggest game of the week, putting 2 top 10 teams together. You have LSU traveling to Texas. This is going to probably answer the question how far back Texas really is. Are they all the way back or not? Shane Ellinger played another great game last week, but Louisiana Tech is not LSU, although they both are in Louisiana. I think LSU put together a great offensive team last week. I think they'll be able to carry together at least some of that offense this week. That's what they've always struggled with over the last 2 or 3 years. So if they're putting the offense together with that great LSU defense, watch out. So I'm going to pick LSU to win this game. So LSU will win at Texas. Our next game is going to the West Coast. We have Nevada, who, as I mentioned earlier, is coming off of that big comeback win over Purdue last week. They are traveling to Oregon this week. Oregon coming off that loss to Auburn last week, where they led most of the game until the last minute when Auburn came back to win. So this week, I think Oregon at home is going to be able to put it all together. Although Nevada did make the comeback win over Purdue last week, I don't see a comeback win coming this week. I'm picking Oregon over Nevada this week. Our next game goes to the second comeback win I mentioned at the top of this video. North Carolina, after the comeback win against South Carolina last week, is kicking off ACC play this week at home against Miami. We know Miami looked pretty ugly against Florida in week 0, although they did come close to winning that game. But at home this week, I'm going to pick North Carolina to keep the momentum going. North Carolina over Miami at home in ACC play. Our next game, let's go back to the West Coast. Let's go back to another Pac-12 team at home. Stanford is going to USC in a Pac-12 opener for both of these teams. Stanford looked pretty good against Northwestern last week. USC didn't look too bad against Fresno State last week. The question for both of these teams is, how is their backup quarterback going to look with both quarterbacks likely out? USC quarterback out for the entire season after going down to an ACL injury. Stanford's quarterback is questionable with a possible concussion for this week. Who's going to win this game? It's going to go to who has the depth behind quarterback, and I think that's Stanford. So I'm going to pick Stanford to win at USC. So now let's go to the game I'm going to be at on Saturday night. Minnesota at Fresno State. As I just mentioned, Fresno State did look pretty decent at USC, but could not put it together in the second half and ended up falling to USC. Minnesota struggled a little bit last week at home. They're traveling here to Fresno State, and I think honestly Fresno State is going to find a way to put it all together this week. They're playing at home when I think it's going to be a toss-up game. Most of the time I would go with the home team, and in that case it is Fresno State. So Fresno State over Minnesota at home. As I mentioned, I'll be at the game. I'll post my thoughts about the game and my experience at the stadium and on campus and everything I've done in Fresno in the upcoming week. Again, on my website, cfbroadtrip.com. Hope you all go and check it out. Next week, I will be traveling from Fresno down to LA to check out the Oklahoma-UCLA game at the Rose Bowl Stadium. So come check it out again. It's going to be a fun week, both here in Fresno and in LA. Check it all out. Have a great week, everyone. Enjoy the Week 2 games, and we'll talk to you for Week 3.